Hey, if you brought a Bible, go ahead and turn to Song of Solomon, chapter 3. I'll give you a little while to find it. I know some of you, if you're new to church or if you're new to the Bible in general, Song of Solomon you didn't even know existed in the Bible, and that's totally fine. It's an interesting one. We're 3 chapters in. Today we're going to cover the final the final part of, well, actually all of chapter 3, verses 1 through 11. We're covering today. This is week 5 of a series we're calling Naked. And what we're doing in this series is exposing, uncovering God's plans for relationships, sex, and romance. Now, as you're turning in Song of Solomon chapter 3, I'll warn you that, I think you know this, but after Song of Solomon chapter 3 comes Song of Solomon chapter 4, which if you've read ahead, you might be a little shocked at some of the content that is included in Scripture. And so I just want to preface that we are now 1 week out from our first PG-13 version of the Naked series, okay? So next Sunday comes with a PG-13 warning. Now, that does not mean, parents, listen, that in my opinion does not mean you should keep your kids home. In fact, they're hearing this content already in the hallways of their public schools, and I think that this is the appropriate place to talk about it. So we're going to deal with it in a biblical manner. We're going to deal with it. We're not going to downgrade sexuality as our world does, but we're going to lift it up as the gift that God has given within the confines of marriage. And so this week, week 5, the couple is engaged and goes through the wedding ceremony. And then you might guess what happens after that. It's the wedding night. And we'll just say there's a little bit of a party that takes place in chapter 4. And so you can read ahead if you'd like. And be ready for next week. But I just wanted to warn you, PG-13 next week. And before I start the message next Sunday, what I'll do is probably say, hey, today is PG-13. If you need to leave now, you got about a minute to exit. Otherwise, we're going to start this thing, all right? So that's next week. As we dive into chapter 3 today, we're in this part where we're still going through, we're 5 weeks in, and so we've been talking all about attraction and them becoming attached and dating and getting to know each other. And if I'm being honest with you, I kind of wanted to combine last week and this week and let's keep moving here. But then I just thought, isn't that real life when it comes to relationships? We just want to move quicker. We want to, and I think if anything that we could learn, one valuable thing about relationships is slow down a little bit, We need to pump the brakes a bit. Maybe even for you growing up, you had dreams and ideas of your future spouse, what marriage or the wedding day would look like. I found out Jen, before we got married, she was telling me, I didn't allow this to scare me off, but before we got married, I found out that she had, growing up, wanted to have 10 children. 5 boys that started with the letter J, and 5 girls that started with the letter A. And I was like, that is so Duggar of you, if you know what I mean, right? Let's slow down a little bit, We have 3 now. We're very thankful for our 3. We had 1, and then we laughed at, can you imagine having 9 more right now? I need to breathe a little bit, right? Sometimes you even growing up, you might have these dreams or ideas of what that's going to be like. In fact, I think a lot of times, unfortunately, what we do is we romanticize romance. What I mean by that is we turn it into this thing that we think if we just find the right person, if we can track down the right guy or the right girl, and we just spend enough time together and we do all the right things, then it's just going to work, right? And so sometimes we can walk into a relationship with this pseudo self-confidence, like it's just going to happen because he's my soulmate, she's my soulmate, and so just going to work. Have you guys ever, let me illustrate this. Have you ever watched the Food Network and you walked away thinking, cakes are super easy to make? You ever you watch something on the Food Network or your favorite talk show, and it's so easy, right? Let me illustrate this to you. If you want to make a cake, it's actually, they're going to tell you, super simple. I mean, all you're going to need is an egg, right? And some flour. You probably dump some flour, some sugar, and then it's amazing. You mix some milk in, and I brought a whisk with me. And so all you do is you mix these up, and then what you do is you stick it in the oven. And what's just incredible is out pops this beautiful carrot cake. And it's just amazing because it's so simple. It tastes amazing. And you turn off the TV and you're like, I'm making carrot cake today, right? And then what happens? You get in the kitchen and it doesn't turn out anything like this. It's sagging all over the place. You don't know what you left out. You taste it, somebody throws up. You know what I'm talking about? Like, it's just not nearly as picture perfect as they make it seem like it is on TV. And I think sometimes we approach relationships like this. We see in our own lives, we've got family members or friends or some people around us, maybe somebody you look to here at church that seems to have the picture perfect relationship. Like, man, I want that. And it seems like they've kind of got it figured out. And so maybe I just ask them a couple questions and I find that guy or that girl and we just kind of mix some things around and out pops the picture perfect relationship, right? Like, shouldn't that be how it is? And what you're going to find is when you find somebody with a picture perfect relationship, number one, chances are it's not nearly as perfect as you think it is. Actually, not chances are. It is not nearly as perfect as you think it is. And number two, somebody who has a solid relationship has worked and worked and worked. See, what they don't tell you on talk TV or on the Food Network is about all of the time and the prep, and they don't demonstrate that. They don't show you the mess in the kitchen. You just got to see a couple quick steps and everything was already measured out. Sometimes I wonder if they even know what they're putting in there, you know? Like somebody just told them what to put in there, and then out pops the cake out of the oven. And if we're not careful, we can approach relationships in this same way. Like I told you, I was kind of tempted to combine the second half of chapter 2 and all of chapter 3. Like, let's move this thing along. This is already week 5. But I just felt like, man, that's real life, and we got to hit the brakes and slow down. There's a lot more to talk about as we go through this. And so what I want to talk about today is that you may have grown up with kind of this dream wedding, dream marriage in your mind, kind of a marriage dream, if you will. But I hope that you're able to see today the importance of putting in the work and the time that will take to get you to your dream marriage. So I'm calling today's message, if you write down this title, In Your Dreams. Song of Solomon chapter 3 is where we're going to be. And we're going to talk today about raising the bar, putting in the work, so that your marriage dream can turn into your dream marriage. That's the goal. Song of Solomon chapter 3 starts with our first 5 verses. Our text divides up very evenly and easy today, unlike most of the rest of the book. But the first 5 verses I'm just calling the wedding dream. And if you look at chapter 3, verse 1, we'll kind of just walk through this, starting with the first 5 verses. And then I've got a couple key points for you guys to jot down. Chapter 3, verse 1. On my bed by night, this is the bride speaking, I sought him whom my soul loves. I sought him, but found him not. I will arise now and go into the city in the streets and in the squares. I will seek him whom my soul loves. I sought him, but found him not. And the watchmen found me, and as they went about the city, have you seen him whom my soul loves, she asks. And scarcely had I passed them when I found him whom my soul loves. I held him, and I would not let him go until I had brought him into my mother's house, into the chamber of her who conceived me. I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem. Here's the phrase that we've heard a few times. By the gazelles or the does of the field, that you do not stir up nor awaken love until it pleases. It's got the right time. So I want to point out a couple quick things here. In verse 1, first of all, it says, on my bed by night. That word night in the Hebrew is in the plural. So one way you could translate this is night after night. It sounds like she's recounting kind of a dream, maybe in fact in this context a bit of a nightmare where there's some separation. This would be post-marriage, and she realizes he's not in bed with her, and she's roaming the city trying to find him. And that seems to describe the picture of what's happening right here, this recurring dream. And although this is a dream that's being recounted, there's a couple big principles that I think we can learn from it. And so I want to give you two things about the wedding dream to keep in mind. Number one, here's something we learned from it. Raise the bar and keep it high. When it comes to a relationship, raise the bar. Now they're so in love. I mean, you guys know this. Some of you who are not into romantic movies, chick flicks, you've been a little sick to your stomach hearing all of their pet names for each other, right? You're just like, could we move this along a little bit? And if you're around this couple, it's even more nauseating because you're like, could you just not while I'm here, you know? They're exchanging all of these cute pet names. And right now, before the marriage, they're just giving each other pet names. Starting next week, they name each other's body parts, so come ready for that next week. But I think the highest compliment of a name that she can give to him is what she says 4 times in the first 4 verses of Song of Solomon chapter 3. She calls him 4 times, him whom my soul loves. And like, what a phrase, right? She is so in love with this guy that she goes, my soul loves him. Everything, what is your soul? Your soul is who you are. She goes, all of who I am loves this guy. Him whom my soul loves. One of the books I was reading about, Song of Solomon this week, the author said, in choosing a marriage partner, it's good advice to choose someone not just that you can live with, but someone whom you cannot live without. And I love this idea that he is for her, and I believe he would reciprocate the feeling, they are the person that they love with their own souls. And so she is searching about the city. You can tell starting in verse 1, and she realizes he's not there in this recurring dream. And I think so often that when it comes to a relationship, the bar starts high. You know, like when you're a teenager, maybe you're dreaming about who that guy is, who that girl is, and you've got a list. Let me tell you, he better look this way. He better do this. I'll bet he's going to have these hobbies, and he's going to want this many kids. And you've got, pages of things you want in your future spouse. And then as the years go by and you haven't found that guy, there's a tendency to start ripping out some of the pages, if you know what I mean, right? Like, that's not that important. I'll cross that one off. And I don't know if I need 5 through 10 any longer. I'll wipe those out. And maybe this will narrow the playing field a little bit or broaden the playing field a little bit. And maybe I can finally find him. And then, like, you know, you're moving along in years. And I meet people who I feel like have majorly dropped the bar just to try to find the guy already, you know? You're like, hey, have you met this guy? And she's like, is he breathing still? I could date that, right? Like, all right, he's a man and he's breathing. Perfect, set us up, you know? It's like they just dropped the bar. I feel like I've met plenty of people who seem to be what I would say they're playing limbo with relationships. How low can I go? And they've dropped the bar so low. And let me speak to this for a moment because I think this is more serious than we often make it out to be. Because I believe so often that we drop the bar because of our own insecurity or lack of self-worth. I think I don't deserve someone that good, and so I'm not even going to aim for it anymore. I'm just going to drop the bar because that's probably, if I'm being honest with myself, more along the lines of who I deserve because of my failures. And why is that so important for me to share it with you? Because that's who I was. That's what I thought about myself. Coming out of my teenage years and being exposed in my sin and having been, before I met Jen, not faithful like I should have been with a former girlfriend. And because of the weight and the shame and the guilt that I dealt with, I remember after breaking up with the girl that I dated before Jen, I remember praying this sad, doubt-filled prayer. And I'm just so thankful, by the way, that God sees through the sad and the doubt, and he can actually give us something that's so much better. But I just remember praying like such a sad, doubtful prayer. God, I don't deserve somebody who's pure. I don't deserve somebody who honors you and wants to live for you, but if she's out there, could you maybe bring her my way? I mean, it was something as sad and doubt-filled as that. And wouldn't you know, just a few weeks later, God brought Jen into my life. And what, like, she is so much more than I could have ever deserved. And I didn't pray a big prayer of faith that God would bring someone like Jen into my life. And yet, I want us to, here's why I think this is so important that we raise the bar. Because you are a son or a daughter of the King. You are worth more. Yeah. Don't lower the bar because of your failure in the past and think that you're just damaged goods and I don't deserve anything good. No, you are royalty according to Scripture. You are a son or a daughter of the King, and your heavenly Father, I want you to know, wants what's best for you. So aim high, raise the bar, find someone who your soul loves, all of who you are, and don't drop that bar for anybody. You with me on that? So keep a couple pages if you need to of all of those expectations and keep that bar high. I think this is so important. And she's found him. He has found her. And they're just in love and they're getting to know each other. And here's one more thing that we can learn from the wedding dream, okay? We already talked about raising the bar and keeping it high, but here's the second thing. Marriage, listen to this. This is important. Marriage isn't 50-50, it's 100-100. Okay? If you were here last week, we talked about the importance of this old school way of dealing with the relationships and letting the man lead. And I know some people are like, man, that's old school. That's how my grandma tells me to do it, but this is 2018, you know? And we talked about how in a relationship, the man isn't better than the woman, but the man has been placed in the relationship to lead. The responsibility and the authority to lead the relationship is on the shoulders of the man. The weight of that is on the shoulders of the man. So we talked about last week, if he can't lead before you get married, what makes you think he's going to lead after you get married? So leadership is important in the relationship. And he is, all throughout so far these first couple chapters, pursuing her. But now did you notice that it's shifted a bit and she is now pursuing him? She's going after him in the dream. She realizes he's not around and she goes to find him. And I want to remind you of a couple things we talked about last week, that every relationship, even a friendship, is a two-way street. It requires give and take on both sides. So it's not just, the man leading in the relationship isn't just about him doing all the work and the ladies kick up their feet, although the ladies should have plenty of time to kick up their feet, okay? But the man should be leading, but so should the woman needs to be pursuing as well. It takes both sides of a pursuit. And so here she is traveling around the city trying to figure out where he went in this recurring dream she's having. And just because you finished dating and your engagement period and you got married doesn't mean your work stopped. Come on, married people. It just began. Are you with me on that? It's just getting started. You thought it was challenging dating and being engaged. The real work is after you put that second ring on and say, I do. That's where the real work and the real commitment really comes in. And so she's dreaming of this relentless pursuit. And I love that thought because this, to me, is a picture of marriage. Relentlessly pursuing one another. And sometimes not knowing where the other one is, right? Come on, man. You can speak to that. Sometimes I'm like, I'd love to leave. I don't know where my wife is. I don't know where she is. I can't find her. Sometimes she can't find me, right? Thankfully, we have leashes called cell phones now today. I also find this interesting. She's pursuing him. And it says that in verse 3 that the watchmen found me as they went about in the city. Now think about this for a moment. She feels alone. And she also feels unsafe or unprotected because Solomon's gone. Now, watch this. She's found some other men who are kind of the police of the city who could, if she let them, provide companionship and safety for her. But did you notice that when she finds them, she goes right on past them? Instead of settling for their companionship and safety, she goes, you could keep me safe, but you're not Solomon. And I'm after the guy whom my soul loves. I don't even know where he is right now, but I'm on a relentless pursuit to find him. And too many marriages, in fact, too many relationships end because, or find themselves in a deep pit because there was a pursuit, but after a while of not finding him or her, they found somebody else who brought them some comfort. They found somebody else who brought them some companionship. They found somebody else that they felt safe around. But can we take it from Shulamite's example here? Go past them and find the one whom your soul loves. Right? Marriage isn't 50-50. It's 100-100. Both sides. You've got to both sides be pursuing one another. And so a godly relationship requires pursuit. It also requires restraint. Look at verse 5. Do not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. If you thought sexual, physical temptation was challenging when you were dating, wait till you get engaged. Wait till you get a ring on that finger and a commitment, a deeper commitment in the relationship, and you're talking about the wedding plans. It gets even more challenging then. And you got to fight even harder. And I think this is so key, the verse right before the wedding begins to take place, that she's reminding them of this. I read a book recently that I told you about at the beginning of this series. It's available on our website to purchase. It's called Jesus, I forget the title, Jesus and the Sexual Relationships That the Church Forgot, something along those lines. And it's by the author Mo Izum. And one of the things that I found really intriguing in the book was she mentioned that she and her husband, when they were dating, had been sexual, and they regretted that. It was really, their relationship was really riddled with guilt before they got married. And so she said it took months after they got married, when sex then is honoring God and a healthy thing in a marriage. She said that she used the phrase sex guilt was all over their marriage for the beginning a few months, because all that they knew when they were sexual before their marriage was guilt that was tied to those sexual relationships. And so then even once they were married and it was a good thing for them to be sexual with each other, they had this guilt, this overwhelming feeling of guilt that was tied to it. And so we could learn from that of the importance of not stirring up or awakening love until the time is right. So if you want a godly relationship, it needs a pursuit, and it also needs restraint, and that requires 100% from both people. Not 50-50, not I'm just going to meet you in the middle, I'm all in. I'm running after you who my soul loves. Okay? So now we come to verse 6, and it's a bit of a transition in the text. So we go from the wedding dream to the dream wedding. Verse 6. What is that coming up from the wilderness like columns of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, with all the fragrant powders of a merchant? Behold, it is the litter of Solomon. Now let me just cue you in on who's talking here. This is most likely people who are lining the streets of Jerusalem, watching as this giant wedding procession comes marching into the city. And people are just trying to push their friends out of the way to get a glimpse at this giant wedding, okay? Long before Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, there was Solomon and Shulamite, okay? We were peering over the crowds trying to figure out what is happening with this wedding. This is amazing. Look at verse 7. Around it are 60 men, 60 mighty men, some of the mighty men of Israel, all of them wearing swords and expert in war, each with his sword at his thigh against terror by night. King Solomon made himself a carriage from the wood of Lebanon, the most expensive wood you could buy. He made its posts of silver, its back of gold, its seat of purple. Its interior was inlaid with love by the daughters of Jerusalem. Go out, O daughters of Zion, and look upon King Solomon with the crown with which his mother crowned him on the day of his wedding. Watch this. Here's how he describes the day of his wedding. The day of the gladness of his heart. Man, they're in love. So we go from the wedding dream to the dream wedding. Let me tell you two things we can learn from this wedding scene. The first is, sacrifice now so you can celebrate later. This, again, goes along the lines of verse 5, not stirring up or awakening love until it pleases. And you probably noticed this is no small procession. Shulamite, here's what's happened. King Solomon is in Jerusalem, and he's sent this whole procession to go back to the vineyard, go back to where Shulamite lives, and they come and they pick her up and they put her on this fancy couch that's carried by 4 men. And then around those men, it says right here, we just read it, are 60 armed guards. They're there to make sure this girl gets to her groom. And so they begin walking with her, and it's this procession. I mean, we're talking about myrrh and frankincense, and there's pillars of clouds all around them from the incense that's burning, and huge ceremony. But the reason they're able to celebrate now is because they've done such a good job sacrificing early on in the relationship. This is something among many things that we need to learn from them. And, I always get so sad for couples who start dating, maybe get engaged, they move in with each other, they're already being sexual with each other just like a married couple would be. They're basically living a married life without the paperwork and the I do's. And I get so sad for these couples because then when they get married, it's kind of like business as usual. They go back to the same house that they've been in for a while. They continue with the same sexual relations that they've been doing for a while. It's just kind of like, it was a fun day, but they basically spent thousands of dollars throwing a party, and then they resumed their life back to work on Monday. Business as usual. Can I just tell you, the last way you want to describe your wedding day and the beginning of your marriage is business as usual. Solomon describes it as the day of the gladness of his heart. Why could he say that? Well, because they sacrificed early on, and so it led to celebration later on. When they sacrificed, it led to greater celebration, because if you think about it this way, when you indulge in temptation, it ruins part of the celebration later on. Now, please hear me. I'm not trying to be condemning toward anybody. Some of you, like myself, have not been honoring to God in your relationships like you should have been. And so I'm not here to say that there will be no celebration later. What I'm saying is, until we decide to follow the path that God has for us, until we learn to steer clear of temptation and get some accountability in our lives and walk appropriately as we're following Jesus, until we do these things, it's going to ruin so much of the celebration that God has for you on the other side. And I'm just trying to tell you that the sacrifice you have to make today is worth the celebration you can have later. Yeah. It's worth it. I know it's challenging. I've been there. I know it's challenging in a romantic relationship to not get physical with each other. But I'm just trying to help you, because I believe our Heavenly Father would want us to honor Him in the way that He's designed this. And if you'll steer clear of temptation now, you can celebrate later. And that's why this was such an incredible day for them. I meet far too many couples that I think prepare much more for the wedding than they do for the marriage. Can I say that again? I meet way too many couples who seem to prepare much more for the wedding than they do for the actual marriage. Don't let that be said of you. Build a foundation for the... Weddings are fun, but it's over after a day. The marriage is what will continue to last, and that's where you really need to pour yourself into. So sacrifice now so you can celebrate later. Here's the second thing we learn from the dream wedding. Marriage should be a place of protection and provision. Protection and provision are both key. In fact, if you think about it, protection and provision are really two of our most basic needs. And it was a big deal. It would have been a big deal for Shulamite to leave the confines of her house and go to a new city where King Solomon lived, a whole new lifestyle she's stepping into, and she's leaving the protection and the provision of her family. And yet Solomon, through this whole procession, is demonstrating that he can provide for her and protect her, that she is literally in good hands, He's going to take really good care of her. And so he's demonstrating these demonstrating this in a whole bunch of different ways. And I just want to say a quick word to somebody. Maybe you're dating or you're engaged right now, or down the road you will be. And if you find yourself in a relationship where there is no protection and there is no provision, one of two things needs to happen. Well, either way, you need to have a serious conversation. But the second thing is you might need to part ways. Because if you cannot be safe in that relationship, if you don't feel protected and provided for in the relationship, I would warn you highly against continuing on in the relationship. You will need those. Men and women, you need to feel safe in a relationship. What do I mean by protection and provision in a relationship? I mean that in that relationship is a place where you can be who you are. Where you feel protected, you feel like it's a safe place, that they provide for you. That could be financially, but that could be a lot of other ways. And you know what you need in a relationship to receive that provision and protection. And those are so important. Ladies, these are two things that you really need to be paying attention to as you move into a marriage relationship. Is there protection and provision in this relationship? Men, these are two things we should aim for. Okay? I'm not saying that it's only the man's job to provide these. It really is both ways. But it is the man's job to make sure they are present in the relationship, to make sure that the relationship is a place of protection and provision. So we've gone from the marriage dream to the dream marriage. And what I hope that you're seeing, and we've spent 5 weeks now detailing this process of them getting to know each other and falling in love. What I hope you're seeing is that if you want a dream marriage, if you want the picture perfect relationship, it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of time. And you got to build a foundation early on. But another thing, and what I'm trying to always tie this back to each week, is that there's a much bigger picture here than just romantic relationships. We always want to tie this back to the most important relationship. And I want you to know that just as a relationship between two people takes a lot of work, a physical or a spiritual relationship takes a lot of work as well. Your relationship with Jesus will not just happen. It doesn't just happen one day that you are a mature, growing follower of Jesus. That doesn't just happen. Did you notice in chapter 3, verse 4, that when she lost sight of Solomon, she finally found him. And in verse 4, she says, I held him and would not let him go. Can I just encourage you, if you're following Jesus, don't let go of him. Now, I'm not trying to say that Jesus is trying to get away from you, okay? What I'm saying is that distractions and life can cause us to let go and drift away. And I'll just remind you that if you feel distant from God today, it's not God who moved. God is very present. It's you who have walked away. So what did Shulamite have to do? She had to leave what was comfortable to go find Solomon. I'm wondering today what it might look like for you to leave something that is comfortable to find Jesus. I hope that you hear me, that when we come together, we're about so much more than just making sure you have a good romantic relationship. Right? Like, this isn't a marriage seminar. I do think that relationships are so vital to who we are as people, as followers of Jesus. But the most important thing is that you have worked out the most important relationship, and that's you and Jesus. So before we try to get anything else right between other people, we need to make sure that things are right between us and God. And so I'm not sure what it would look like for you to leave something that's comfortable and pursue Jesus, but I hope today you would understand the importance of doing that. That whatever sacrifice you have to make, it's worth it in the long run because of the celebration that's coming. Amen?